Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 108. Thank you for joining us. Today we continue our discussion of world travel, but this time with Kolbe students Martina, B, and Cathy, who spent their Easter break traveling with Kolbe classmates, parents, and teachers. Join us as we hear about their whirlwind trip through Greece and Rome. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, liturgical musician, popcorn and podcast fanatic, and Kolbe homeschooling mom to 4 lads and lasses of middle and high school age.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Tour continues as we gather a few of the travelers who made a recent trip to Greece, Rome, and other historic and culturally significant places with Mrs. Kelly Powers this past Easter season. Stephen and I are joined today by Martina, whom we met on episode 76, Study Buddies, along with B and Cathy, students who got to experience in person some of the lands they've read about in their Kolbe studies. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Sure. It's good to see you again, Martina. It's great to meet you, Cathy and B. We're looking forward to getting to know you and hearing about your trip. So, B, would you start us off? Would you tell us about yourself, maybe how you use Kolbe and what your interests are outside of school, if the schoolwork ever ends, and like what you work on outside of that, and those sorts of things. Help us get to know you a bit.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is B, and I just finished my second year at Kolbe.
Okay.
And I switched over during COVID because I wanted a better online environment, and I found that I loved it, and so I stayed. Outside of school, when I have time, I play soccer. I do competitive soccer year-round, which takes a lot of time too. And then in the winter, when I find some more time, I like to drive up to the mountains and go snowboarding. And during the summer, I like to drive up to the mountains and go backpacking.
Oh, that's neat that they're near enough for you to do that. Is that like a weekend trip or a day trip even for you?
Yeah, so lots of the time I go snowboarding on just a day trip. I drive up 3 hours, come back, and those are long days. And then backpacking trips are more weekend trips.
Oh, wow. Okay. So do you do mostly online, Kolbe, or do you do some homeschool classes too?
Yeah, mostly I do Kolbe online, and then I take about 3 classes homeschooled.
Okay, cool. All right. Cathy, would you tell us about you?
Hi, I'm Cathy. I just finished my 3rd year of Kolbe online. I'm full-time except for 1 class, and I started because my sister was a competitive gymnast, and she needed to be homeschooled to be able to do her hours. So she came to Kolbe, and she really loved it. So then the rest of my family switched over. Outside of school, I do competitive year-round rowing, which takes up most of my time outside of school, so that's pretty much it. But I like maybe learning to play the guitar, and I like to read.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds like a fun array of interests that you have. We met Cathy's mom, Anna, on a couple of other Kolbecast episodes. Anna was part of a conversation about student athletes. All right, Martina, it's great to see you again. We met you a while back in episode 76. We also had the great pleasure of visiting with your sister and your parents on their episodes, which I will link in the show notes. How have you been? Would you catch us up a bit?
Yeah, sure. I've been well. So I just finished junior year, and I'm currently a rising senior. I've been with Kolbe probably since the beginning. I started homeschooling, so I'm a big Kolbe fan. I just love the classes, the curriculum, and yeah, so I'm very sad that I'm a senior, but it's been a fun ride. I live in New York, and I play volleyball. I love sports, so I'm really competitive. So I love that aspect of sports. But yeah, other than that, I play tennis, and I used to dance and other things like that. But that's currently me right now. So.
Lots going on as usual. That's great. And we were just talking before we started recording about the senior year. There's so much good stuff still to come in that senior year. It's some tough decisions on what to take class-wise, from balancing the other things that the seniors have on their plates. And goodness.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's familiar territory. Yikes. Okay. All right. So over Easter season, you guys got to take a very exciting trip to Greece and Rome and some areas around those places. We are missing a few who went on the trip, weren't able to be here in conversation with us today. Martina, can you give us some background on how this trip came together?
Yeah, sure. So it was actually supposed to happen 2020. And so I was currently a freshman when that was I signed up. And so it actually didn't happen until I was a junior. So there was that 3 years of they kept postponing it and everyone was super sad. But everyone's spirits were still high that it would happen, and everyone was super excited that it would happen.
It's interesting to hear how a trip like this comes together for a distance learning school. How does that, we're kind of a point of reference of a brick and mortar school organizing a trip like this, but for a distance learning school, that's a different story. So your explanation of the logistics is helpful.
So then we unfortunately, I think there was originally 30 people going on the trip, but unfortunately, due to vaccination requirements, it dropped down significantly. So I think overall there was about 5 or 6 of us that ended up going, which was sad, but it was great because then we had more of that intimate, bond where we could talk to each other and really know each other better. So then we had meetings, we met up, we had a few meetings regarding the logistics, and that's when we got to know each other a teeny bit better. I actually never had classes with any of them. So they were complete strangers to me, but soon I would know they're really great people. So Katie and B are just fabulous girls. But so then we met in Atlanta actually, since we're from all over the country. And then so I met Mrs. Powers for the first time. That was super fun because you never really take it into perspective height. Yeah. Or what people are in person. So sometimes people are taller than you expected, shorter. So that was super cool. And then Mr. Davey came with us as well. So it was nice to have a parent there as well. And then that's when our adventure began. And then we took the flight. We were first at Greece for 3 days, girls. Is that correct? Something like that, right? Okay. And then so the first day was just a rushed overview of seeing everything, all the main sites, and we just went around the city really fast. And then the second day we took an excursion, I think, right? Or was that the third day? The last 2 days we took excursions.
And how long were you all there? This is how many days in Greece? You said 3 days, and you did
3 days. Well, technically
49 things.
Literally, technically it was 2 days and a half. So we arrived. And we had 2 full days, and then the third day was we had a flight in the afternoon.
Whoa.
And then so we had a fast. They're oh, actually we can do a fast excursion if you guys want to go. And we're sure. So I think the first day was Athens and the surroundings, the Parthenon, and then we had a day trip, as B was saying. And then we saw a few other temples. It was more of just the outskirts of Athens. And then the last day in Greece, we went to some it was more a town towards the coast. So it was nice to see more that beachy, you could say, vibe of Greece. And that was super nice because we had really nice weather. It was more raining the other days, unfortunately, but it was still fun. And then we flew to Rome. And what was super cool also was our tour guide. He knew a bunch of languages. So it was interesting for him to go from speaking Greek to the people and then speaking Italian, and then he was going back and forth. We were oh, this is so cool. Yeah. And then another I think it was only 2 days actually in Rome, and that's when we saw Colosseum. We had a walking tour of Rome, so seeing the fountains, and then we went to Vatican City and all of that. But that's just the overall logistics. And then we had connections back home. So we went to Amsterdam, then we went to France for our connections. So that was super interesting as well. So we got our little stamps in those countries as well. But that was just a fast summary. A lot more happened in those days.
It gives us a good glimpse of the pace of your trip. It's from sun up to sundown and beyond, probably. All right, wow, okay. Bea and Katie, I hear there were some extras that somehow came up. I'm not sure how with your packed schedule. That you fit in some extras along the way. Do you want to tell us about those?
So Wednesday night we are gonna fly out to Rome from Greece, but since our flight was at like maybe 8 p.m., we had like the whole day. So originally it was going to be like a free kind of roam around kind of wherever you want in Athens day, but they gave us the optional like extra excursion, and it was to like Nafplion, I think, and I don't know how to say the name of the other one, but they were like cities like on the water, and it was really nice, and we got to like go look at the town and some ruins surrounding it, and then we left from there to the airport. So that was one of our experiences.
I think it was interesting also to see like the different landscapes and how like it could change a lot as you're going more towards the coast. And so like as we were driving, because I think it was about like a 2-hour drive, he would explain like the history of like, oh, like this used to be the tribe of these people. Like you could see like you would explain all the history behind like as we were driving through. And I think that was super fascinating, especially as like we read about all these different like types of people in our like the books like freshman year, sophomore year as well. So like to see that come to life, that was super fascinating.
So have you all traveled overseas like this before, or was this the first time for you guys to embark upon a trip like this?
So this was my second time traveling to a different continent. I went to Spain once with my family, and we traveled basically everywhere in Spain. We were basically in a different city every day. So it was similar in that it was super like action packed, and just all the days were filled, but it was a very different culture.
Yeah. What about you, Katie? Have you done this before?
I've never been out of the country. So my dad he was in the military, so we traveled a lot when I was younger, like in the US. And then everybody in my family is like in a competitive country, so this was my first time doing that.
Okay. What about you, Martina?
Since my parents are from abroad, so my dad's from Denmark and mom's from Ecuador, like this was not my first time. But I've been very blessed to like travel to a bunch of other countries as well, including Denmark and Ecuador, of course, my parents are from there. Egypt, China, New Zealand.
Wow.
So like that's the one thing my family really loves. So just like sharing their cultures and different cultures as well.
Sure. I remember that from the conversation with your parents about
Yes.
the value they placed on traveling and the opportunities they had because of homeschooling to be able to travel.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you did not know each other before the trip. Did you have any kind of idea of the others before you got to meet in Atlanta, or that was the point when you really got to started getting to know each other well, or did you have some kind of idea going in what the others were like, so that when you rendezvoused, you kind of pick up from there?
She was in my honors theology seminar,
Okay.
and then her mom was my chemistry teacher last year.
Okay.
But otherwise, I didn't know anybody or know of anybody.
Okay. But then you had a while to get to know each other on your flights and.
Yeah. All I knew, I was the oldest. I was like, oh, this would be interesting. And I was like, oh, you're gonna be the junior, and there's an 8th grader, and like these other people as well. I was like, oh, but like I didn't know much of like you other guys, like the rest of you guys. But we had like a little group chat going on beforehand. So that was fun, just to like get a little bit of an idea of like, okay, like this is what they're like maybe. But I think like until we met each other in person, that was more of like, oh wow, like this is your personality. Like it was nice to put a personality to a face and a name to a face. So that's when we really got to know each other.
So like Katie said, my mom was her teacher, and I shared a honors theology seminar class, but that was only once a month, so we didn't really know each other. And then I actually knew Adriana and Ariana from outside of Kolbe via one of the many Kolbe group chats.
Oh, okay. I'm imagining when you guys met in Atlanta, knowing Mrs. Powers, who has been on the Kolbecast a number of times, we'll look up and link all of the episodes that she has graced. I'm imagining she probably had some kind of distinctive either costume or designation so that you knew just where to find her. How did that go when you all met up together?
So we were traveling from all different parts of the country, and we arrived at very different times. I know that Katie got there first and sat there with Mrs. Powers for hours, and I was the last person to arrive. I think she had a big like Kolbe sign, and then she was wearing a Kolbe shirt. I don't think she wore any of her costumes. You can ask the other girls about it, but I believe she thought about bringing a costume and then decided that she didn't have enough room in her suitcase.
She was just like wearing Kolbe merch. And so
Gotcha.
she had the Kolbe shirt and the Kolbe like sweater.
Right.
So we definitely spotted her as we were walking to meet her.
It's representing. Well, way to go. Okay. I can see she might want to save her costumes for another occasion. Yeah. Sounds like she chose the appropriate one for the trip. Yeah.
Definitely.
I would love for you to tell us about seeing some of the sites that most of us only get to read about through the Kolbe material. You mentioned already, Martina, thinking of that, the Greek year, the ninth grade year in your previous studies, seeing these places in person. What connections were you able to make to what you've learned in your Kolbe classes, and what was it like just being there from what you've been reading about and studying?
I think it was pretty cool just seeing like the places that we were learning so much about and kind of seeing like how they kind of not like evolved, but how they were like different and similar to what we were kind of like learning about, because it's like history and stuff. So it's obviously like different, I guess, because the past versus the present. So I think that was interesting. And then we obviously didn't get to meet like any of the people in our readings. So that was kind of a joke we had, but it was cool like seeing all the monuments they had for people, and how the history was still like a true part of what it currently was when we got to see it.
Sure. What about you, B?
We didn't read about this, but one thing I found really interesting to get to visit was Vatican City, because we are a Catholic school and there's so much of that environment. And so it was really interesting to see like St. Peter's Basilica and all these amazing, just deeply Catholic things, and see the Swiss guards. And that was very interesting.
What about you, Martina?
Yeah, I would say in regards to, I think I was really excited to see Greece, because I've been to Rome before when I was younger, but it was really interesting to see how like time kind of like stood still there, where you could see like the remains of the past, but at the same time like you could see like, oh, like where we were at that time, and then like how far we have come. Yet at the same time, like humanity is still kind of very much the same in good ways and bad ways. And so I think it was a nice reminder, like just to contemplate in a lot of the sites and be like, oh, like, wow, there was individuals actually sitting here one day, and I'm sitting here today, but differently. Also, it was a nice reminder of like, we're not going to be here on earth forever. In the end, like it's those little like aspects, like, our actions that will remain are the good things we have done. But I would have to say like my favorite like parts of the trip in Rome, when we went to Pompeii, was the last day. So that was an add-on. I thought it was super interesting because I didn't know much about Pompeii. We read a little bit about it, but we didn't go in depth about it. We had the whole town was reserved because of the volcano erupt and everything like that. You could see like what they did every single day. There was like the bread shop. There was all these different aspects, a house, and so stuff we still do today, like people did back then as well. And there was a bunch of casts that were left, so that you could see like how people died and in what positions they died. And there was like a cast of a pregnant woman as well. And so I thought it was just super fascinating to see, again, like these were ordinary people, and like you could kind of see like the desperation for survival. And so it was kind of just like a moment where you were like a good moment for contemplation, because it was a tragedy. So like that whole place really just stuck with me. And again, unfortunately, it was pouring when we went, so like we were like rushing through with our umbrellas, like it was pouring down, our shoes were wet. But it was definitely a nice moment. And again, like Vatican City as well, just to see our faith like alive and on fire was super great, just to see the historical, like the richness of our faith. But yeah, I think those two were like really great highlights.
All right. B or Katie, do you have any standout moments in your memories from the trip as far as your destinations of all the places that you went? Any of them stand out in your mind?
I really enjoyed Delphi. We talked, it's like kind of there like the whole year throughout history and religion, because it's like this kind of landmark in a lot of things that we're learning and reading about. But I didn't really picture what it looked like, I guess. But also I didn't realize how much of like an important role it was in like their society. So I thought it was really cool that we got to learn like more about the role of like the oracles and all this stuff in society and see what it kind of looks like. And I also really liked Pompeii because I also didn't realize how well preserved the buildings and everything were. Like I thought everything was like completely in ruins, but I kind of learned that like the only thing that really, or like everything suffered, but I feel like the thing that suffered the most was the people, and that everything else was like really well intact, and you got to see like a lot and learn a lot about how they lived.
Wow, okay.
I really enjoyed our walking tour of Rome because like you would go to all the big places like the Colosseum, the Pantheon, the Spanish Steps, but then while you were walking to those places, you just turn a corner and there'd be some random Roman aqueduct just crossing the road, or there'd be some church that's just like hundreds of years old, and it was very crazy to just see how much how many historical buildings there are, and just see how old of a city it really is.
Going off what Katie was saying, I thought like regarding Delphi, it was super interesting. Like I think that was like one of my favorite days as well in Greece, regarding like just like the tour guide, the way she explained the history was incredible. And what I thought was super interesting was, again, like we read a bunch of the material she was talking about in school, so we're like, oh, like we know that, like
Yes.
we're not experts, but we know a little bit about that. But above all, it was like they would talk about like how they would sacrifice all these different things, like they would try to like predict the future and like different aspects. But what I thought was also like you could see like how the completion of the mass, like how like the way they like sacrifice and like do these different things, you could see like how like I don't know, the development of all, of course, like the Jews and everything, but also like if you continue on, you can see like how like historically how the mass completes all of these desires in our hearts. And just like I don't know, it was just a cool way to see like let's get out of like let's look historically, and we can see like how far we've come and how like really Jesus Christ came and like fulfilled all of these desires we have, like in so many different ways. So I thought that was just super cool. And again, what like B was saying, I think just like all the gelato we ate in Rome was super fun, and like all the fountains we went to were like, also it was at night, so it was like super romantic. The three of us were just like walking around, like just like looking at all these different like lights and these people walking. So it was just like, it was nice to enjoy those little moments where you could just see like, the stars and all of those different aspects. So that was super great.
I'd just been talking to somebody about they had seen one of the giant statues of Athena and they were struck by, they thought, this is not somebody who loves me. There's a kind of dominating presence. But did you kind of seen both kind of the pagan and our Catholic wonders there in this trip? Did you notice, was there a difference? Were there things that stood out in that way? I'm just curious.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I think for me, it's kind of interesting because religion back then was like a big part of their society, I guess. Like it influenced their everyday life and like their laws as like a whole country or city. Like it was part of them almost, And so it was like this super big deal, and you can like see it everywhere, like everyday houses or like any of their kind of ruins, you can see exactly like what gods they're like worshiping there and stuff that I thought was super interesting, which you can see kind of in Christianity now, but it's not like, it's kind of different, I guess, for me to see like that stuff. Sorry, I don't know if that made sense. Yeah.
I think I would add, it's interesting to like going off what you were saying, like you could see like they're very like you could see more dominance amongst the gods, and it's more of like I'm the god of you, you do what I say, because if not there'll be consequences. So it's like very much of like you do this or like you don't, like you'll be in trouble. And then it was cool to see the contrast between like, okay, like when Jesus came like on this earth, it was not like that. There was so much compassion. And you can see in the church, there's that certain like, it's not just like we believe it just because people told us my mom told me to believe this, so I'm believing it. Like no, that's not what it is. You could see like how the richness, how it goes back, like the depth of our faith, and how it didn't come just because, like it wasn't established just on a mere, like one person said, oh, let's do this, let's all do this, and they started a cult. Like no. Well, you could see more like the God's belief. It's not reasonable, it's not rational. Well, like you could see the faith throughout the whole years has just become stronger, and like through reason, through just history, if you look at history, it makes sense. And so you could see like how far we've come. I like you said, it was an interesting contrast, because a lot of the stuff they believe like with the gods did not make sense. But I just thought it was beautiful to see the compassion of Christ, how much he understands us, how like we're one of his children, we're not like, his slave, in comparison to like the gods, how like they were slaves to the gods. So that's definitely a great point.
That's really interesting.
And I know you mentioned gelato before I asked that question. So I'm for whatever reason, I'm really curious about food when you go to different countries. So what was there a favorite food or a favorite eating experience that you had other than gelato?
A class of its own.
Yes.
So the breakfasts were mostly like they were just served at the hotel, and it was like a buffet style breakfast. In Greece, it was all Greek food, so there would be like Greek yogurt and salami and fruit and just everything. It was pretty crazy. And then in Rome, they had, I don't know what kind of food it was, because there were like croissants, but then there was also like a tart, and it was all just amazing. And then lunches were like you had to go and buy your own lunch. A couple days they were provided, and then it would be served like you just get whatever the tour provided for you. But then every other day they'd basically take us to some square that had a bunch of restaurants and be like, okay, go find whatever you want to eat. And they were all like classic either Greek or Italian restaurants. And then for dinner, it was either back at the hotel eating more Greek or Italian food, or it was provided and we would go to a restaurant and they'd serve us some native dish.
I would say there was this one dish, we had it for dinner. It was just Greek yogurt and honey on top of it, but it was for dessert. And so usually you would think that's a breakfast thing, right? But surprisingly, it was a great dessert because it wasn't like super sweet. It was like refreshing, and it kind of just like cleaned your palate. I loved that. I was like, it's like there's like the nice in between like not so sweet and like that honey that would just like make that Greek yogurt perfect. So I loved that.
Just a thing. What was the weather like when you guys were there? You were mentioning it was raining, but when it wasn't raining, was it hot and humid, or was it pleasant temperatures? What was that like?
I think it was probably around like the 60s the whole time, anywhere from like 50 to 70.
Oh, nice.
I'd say. So I was like a little cold, but I kind of like run colder normally.
Yeah.
But it was pretty nice most of the time. It felt really like a nice breeze and everything.
That does sound nice.
I'm kind of used to New York humidity, so it was nice to like finally go somewhere where it wasn't so humid, like that when it was actually nice out. There was a nice breeze, and it wasn't just like you were drenched in sweat. So that was very pleasant.
It does make it a lot more pleasant.
I quite enjoyed the rain. I live in California where it doesn't rain very much, and so it was so green and pretty, and it was very, very nice.
You guys had to be prepared for all sorts of weather conditions out, didn't you? When you were with your tour guide, did they have you in with a bigger group of people, or was it just your group most of the time?
Since our group was originally bigger, we were going to be by ourselves. But since we lost so many people, they joined our group with another group from Utah. So their school does like trips every other year, and so we got to like join our trip with theirs. So we did all our excursions and stayed at the same hotels and stuff. And then shared a bus and everything. We made some pretty good friends over there.
Yeah, that's neat.
It was pretty cool since they were from Utah and everything. So like a bunch of them hadn't been like out of the US as well. So to see like their reactions towards these different monuments, you could say. They were super nice, very sweet people.
That's a nice bonus. They were good companions for that period of time. Good deal. Do you have any standout moments in your memories from the trip when it came to traveling with a group of fellow Kolbe students?
Well, we were traveling with Mrs. Powers, as you know, and she is quite like everyone at Kolbe knows her and wants to have her as a teacher, and she wears all her costumes. And so one thing was that like it was amazing to get to meet her because she seems like this just like amazing teacher who you'll never get to meet. And all of my friends from Kolbe were like messaging me and they were like, tell her I say hi and she's amazing. Aww. And yeah, so that was very cool and really fun.
Sure.
I would have to say, for me, like it was those little moments of just, for example, we sat down in one of the fountains and we were just sitting there for like a few minutes because you're always on a schedule, you have to go to the next thing. Yeah. They were just sitting there in silence for a little bit, just like absorbing our surroundings. That was just super peaceful. And in the end, like it's one of those little things where you're just sitting down, like looking at where you are, appreciating the people around you. I have to say, like, were some of the best moments and like the things I remember to this day. The sights were great. Like I would have to like go over to see like what I saw, but it was those moments we were like, we had those conversations, especially with Mrs. Powers. Like, I've had her for 3 years, but to have like that deeper conversation, not just like with academics, but just talking about like our life experiences in the past, what we enjoyed during the trip was super, super meaningful to me. And again, just those little conversations were like, that's in the end, that's what really like made an impact on me. So those were great.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Martina. Like my favorite kind of like moments with the people in the group were kind of like tripulated. Like at night, we would kind of like get in one group's like hotel room, sometimes like watch Netflix or just talk, like because we couldn't really fall asleep because of jet lag and stuff. So we just kind of like sit there, and I thought that was like really nice. And then in the morning, when everybody was like struggling to wake up, and we had like 5 minutes to get out the door. And I know like when we were waiting at like the airport, we played cards. So I think that was like the best part for me, like group related one.
Yeah, I remember one of the first things Katie and I bonded about was she had like 3 knee surgeries, and I recently tore my ACL in January and I had surgery in March. And so like I wasn't sure I would be able to go on the trip. My doctor was like, I think you'll make it, just be careful, like don't overdo it. And so like every day Katie and I would like talk about it, like how's your knee doing? And she was like, we would tape our knees up like every time we'd have to like hike a little bit up a mountain or like these little like walkways. But she had like the whole kit. She had like the painkillers, the creams, the ice. So we'd have to like ask every night for ice as well. So that was super funny. But I also remember on the plane, again, just I think we're going from Greece to Rome. And Katie made, out of like the puke bags in the plane. So she made like these little puppets. And so like she first made it like, who was it? You made Hector first or something like that?
And yeah, then, I still have them.
And then we made like all the characters out of Homer. And then like we made the girl, we made all these different characters and we were like playing around with it. It was super funny. But again, it was those little things that like were so fun. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Neat just to have the time. You sure do get to know people on a very deep level when you're traveling with them for any length of time, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Were there any kind of resources that you guys used before your trip to kind of get acquainted with where you were going? Or since you've gotten back, are there ones that you would recommend to people if they're looking for maybe virtual field trips if they're not able to make the actual trip yet? Or did the tour company send you anything in particular to help you kind of get acclimated?
I mean, there was an app that we downloaded that was like connected to our tours. It was like the tour app, and it kind of like gave us a schedule of everything we're going to be doing, optional excursions, when kind of meals were and all this stuff. So we had that like on our phones if we needed it. But everything else was kind of like directed by them. you know,
Okay.
like we didn't really have to worry about anything. They didn't send us like packing lists and stuff like this, but they sent us like helpful stuff like before the trip. Then I just kind of like Googled, you know, like what will the weather be like when we're there and stuff like that. But yeah, so
Okay.
It was super nice because they scheduled our meals too. So a lot of times they would just feed us all the same thing. And at first, like you're like, oh, like I want to try, like I want to pick what I want to eat. But eventually, since we got so tired and it would be such long days, it was so nice because they would just like put something in front of us. We're like, okay, thank you. It has to be good. So we would just eat it. So that's one thing that was nice. I personally don't love like tour guides, like I like to like be able to just explore, like go on, see what I want. There's no schedule. But I would say regarding logistics for trips, my family, anytime we travel, we always use mass times. And so like anywhere we've gone, like because you need a mass, right? Like Sunday mass, you can't miss that. And so you just like you're able to search wherever you are, like, okay, is there a mass near me? And then you can call like them up who make sure there's a mass. And so I found like anytime we've traveled, we've never missed a mass. And we've been all over the world. In China, even like we had to like go underground, like find one secretly.
Wow.
So I find that never failed us. Also, I think just like again, I'm personally more of a person that likes to explore, like not have a super like hour to hour schedule, but just in the mindset when you're traveling to like really appreciate like just walking like in a few streets, like maybe like you don't have a destination, but just like appreciating those little moments of okay, like I have this town, like this area I'm going to see, and like just walk around and see those little things because that's really a great way to get a taste of the culture, of the people, and like I don't know, the buildings. And so yeah, that's probably all I would recommend.
Great. That's great. I love that that's what you thought of first, mass times, checking that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
On the topic of mass, one thing that was really interesting about, especially the culture, we flew into Athens on Easter for the Roman Catholics, but because it was in Greece, it was not Easter. It was Palm Sunday. So when we went to mass, it was weird because it was like it wasn't Easter. We were all like, "What's going on? Like this is not." It felt weird to not go to an Easter mass, and then when we flew to Rome, and so Easter had already happened, and so we never ended up having any Easter mass or anything like that.
That is interesting.
It was definitely cool though because like the priest that gave like did the mass, he was actually from Spain. I think he was from Barcelona. So to see like that, like, oh, where you would think we'd have like a Greek priest, but it was a Spanish priest, like all these different cultures within the church. It wasn't solely just Greek people. So again, to see like, okay, like the different communities and like who came to that mass was super interesting.
Wow. Did y'all figure out how far you walked on average or on any of the days? Did you keep track?
No,
No.
It was too much though.
My
My knee was like,
that was a good meter for you.
Yeah.
You could tell
We needed that ice every single night. It was nice to sleep.
That tells us a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of walking.
We also spent a lot of time on the bus. Most days we spent hours on the bus. Like we spent 3 hours driving somewhere and then see that place and then spend 3 hours driving back. So it was a lot of walking and a lot of sitting on a bus.
Okay.
I think the rough day was our first day in Rome because we literally went to see everything. It was like thing like I can see them this and this and that, like all those fountains. And so and we were behind schedule as well. So like instead of like we moved the fountains to the night. So after dinner, then we had to continue walking. And I think that was the day that was just like a lot. Because you would think after dinner we can go back home to the hotel, but like no, it was like keep walking. We're like, okay. But no, it was super pleasant though, in spite of that.
Fun. Is there anything we haven't gotten to that you want to tell us about the trip or your thoughts afterward now that you've been home for a while and you have looking back on it and keeping in touch with each other? Any final thoughts?
So ever since I was really little, I kind of had like an interest in like mythology and Greece and stuff, and it's always something I kind of learned at like any school I went to. So I always had like an interest in it. So this trip was like really interesting for me. But then also when we were there, they told us that like, because I was under the impression that like most stuff that had been like discovered was like it was like done being discovered, you know, like we've almost discovered everything in the world, which we clearly haven't, but I was under that impression. Sure. So I thought it was really interesting going there and being told like there's so much more that we can learn and discover. And it kind of made me think about like what I want to do later, like in life.
Yeah.
Because previously I've been thinking like doctor of physical therapy maybe, but archaeology, like it's kind of really interesting to me now. So that trip kind of like opened my eyes to like that there's so much more out there.
Yeah, that's neat. With you guys heading into your 10th grade year, the Roman literature and history, that's going to have a whole new meaning for you, having been there this past Easter season.
I would have to say, overall, it was just really neat to like come into this trip, like to look at the historical stuff and everything, but also in the lens of being a Catholic and just showing like all of us had the same faith. It was super nice to just share like our little thoughts and like, oh, like, and especially because I think the people we went with in Utah, they were Mormon. And so like to see their different perspective, especially with Vatican City and all of these different things. But again, it was just super nice to like share our thoughts like regarding faith. And I just want to thank Kolbe really for making this possible, because really it was an experience of a lifetime. Like you can go to a place again and again, but every single time it can be different and unique. And so going with these girls was a blast. And like, again, it exceeded my expectations, not because of like the sites, but just because of the company. And so again, Kolbe keeps creating so many opportunities for students to bond, to create like memories like that will always be with you. And again, just the connection of like faith, the stuff we read in school, relationship, it was just this perfect like coming together of everything like I've been taught in life, but also just, I don't know, that bonding of just human connection. And so I think those like, again, an experience of a lifetime. And I really want to thank Kolbe for providing that opportunity.
Wow, what an experience, and so many experiences, and all synthesizing all of what you're just saying, bringing everything together like that. That's wonderful. A lifelong memory you guys have and bond together. It's been fun hearing about your trip and the experiences and the thoughts you have relating to it. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us. Martina, it was great to see you again. Bea and Katie, it was great to meet you, and wish you guys a great summer, what remains of it, and a great school year upcoming. Thanks so much, guys. Great to see you.
It's so great seeing you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.